Welcome to Chad and Steve Have a Podcast. This is an unfiltered, unedited conversation examining YouTube culture and video content creation and a bunch of other stuff. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Steve's fancy hair. Ooh, la-di-da. Paris Hilton and the camera gear that we use to make our videos. So without further ado, let's get started. Chad, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Steve. How are you doing?
Good. For anybody listening to this, we've just been fooling around with the audio for, I don't know, the past 10 or 15 minutes or something. But I think that this is our first more professional podcast, don't you think? Because we're using an actual audio recording rather than Zoom. We met with Tim Schmoyer, and he told us don't use the Zoom audio. It's horrible.
It only took 7 episodes. We recorded some in like 3-bit. I don't even know what 3-bit is, but I'm sure it sounds mono. What did he akin it to? He said that's kind of like an AM radio. Or no, that's like it's like listening to someone through a telephone. So apologies to everyone who have listened to the first 7 episodes through a telephone.
Well, and I'll be uploading those or posting those online this week, hopefully, so everybody will see those, and then I'll mention it also. Well, the ones on YouTube sound pretty good. I think the ones on YouTube sound okay. The audio, I don't know, maybe it's just different there.
I have yet to watch anything on YouTube which claims to be high definition or high quality or whatever, and it actually sound different than just listening to whatever video that I do. Like some random lyric video for a song seems to sound the same as I guess maybe if you're listening to it very, very like if it's super loud, maybe that would make a difference, but no.
I kind of have this feeling it's like these audiophiles who are always telling you that, like, oh, you got to get vinyl records because the sound quality is so warm and natural. I'm like, I guess sort of, but I think the average person, you listen to music and you're not really gonna know the difference.
They opened an audiophile store years ago where I lived, and me and my brother went because my brother's a bit of an audiophile. And we went, and they had like 1 pair of speakers in the entire store. Well, they had a few, but they had literally like maybe 10 pairs of speakers in the entire store. And they had a big couch and a big screen, and that was basically the entire store. And you went in and you sat down, and then they would just kind of pick different speakers for you to listen to. And I remember they were like $25,000 for a pair of speakers, and they didn't play a movie, they didn't play music, they played like sound effects. It was like the sound of a door opening and closing, and then like footsteps walking, and you could hear it in its end, and we both looked at each other and we're like, we just want Die Hard to be a little louder and hear the explosions and maybe have a subwoofer. It's like $23,000, and they're listening to people walking away from them, but you hear the clarity of how they're walking away, Chad. You hear how clear and crisp. Right. You hear how it's being amplified through the 5.1 surround system. It's quite funny. I don't think I'll at any time be spending $20,000 on a pair of speakers.
That's kind of crazy. Hey, I love. So we got our new little channel, or I keep saying channel, but it's a podcast. It's not really a channel. Is it a channel?
Do we refer to this as a? Yeah,
no,
I mean, if you're on the YouTube channel, it is. It's
on YouTube.
YouTube channel of the podcast.
So we got our avatars, our little cartoon representations of ourselves that you had done. And my first response when I saw those is that doesn't look anything like us. And then as I started looking at it more and more, I thought, it does kind of look like me, the cartoon figure. And then I showed it to a friend of mine, and she was like, I said, this doesn't look anything like me, does it? And she looked at it and she said, yeah, that's pretty close. That's not too bad. And I thought, really? Because it's so minimal.
I was so impressed. And I remember saying this to you earlier. I chose this particular person who was in Italy, I think it was, because they were literally just line drawings. Everybody does the cartoon style, the classic cartoon style. And that's what we kind of, or at least I initially wanted. And then I saw this, I'm like, I'd be interesting to see if just like the one subtle line, which is, outlining my nose, my beautiful 3D complex nose on my very unique face. And this person, one little crooked line, is like, yeah, that's my nose. I looked at your hair and I'm like, man, how do you like 3 little lines and like that's Steve's hair?
It looks so fancy. My hair looks really fancy.
The thing that I do appreciate is she gave me no gray hair. I
I know they were.
I
It
have
was all
beautiful brown hair, and I haven't had beautiful brown hair for a very long time. But
well, see, I have, but mine's unnatural. I have to get mine done every month, otherwise it would be fully gray. I started going gray when I was like 30. It was around one time my son was born. I started going gray.
I got married shortly after I met Melissa. We we often bring up that I went gray after Melissa. But yeah, I was a young, vibrant, brown-haired boy, and then I met Melissa Maker, and
Yeah. I get it professionally done now. I'm like, no, I don't really want gray. I'm just gonna get colored. And so once a
have
month,
you
my stylist does it. And she does a good job. She does like this blended color where it doesn't look like this, like the
right?
Just for Men packet that you pour, and it's just black.
Yes.
So it's like it still has gray in it, and then when it starts to grow out, it looks more natural. You don't get that like solid line of gray. Sometimes it varies. Usually the first couple days is kind of harsh, but then it'll tone down and it looks pretty natural.
Have you used a Just for Men product? Have you like bent
No,
over the bathtub with the towel and the whatnot?
I have not, because I've seen just too many horrible. Usually, I can see a guy and I'm like, oh wow, that's really a bad dye job, And I don't, and I have a feeling it's that. Maybe I'm sure there's guys who can do it right, but I would rather have a professional do it.
My father did it himself, and he used to do it in the bathtub, and then
Yeah.
he would be done with it, and for like 5 weeks later, there'd be black marks all in. He like dyed the bathtub as well. Plus, I mean, this was the 80s. This was a time, I'm sure I'm sure it literally just was paint that you were rubbing, paint flecks that you're rubbing into your hair. I'm sure the technology is amazing now, and it's a lot easier to maybe do. But yeah, it used to put a towel and hunch over and rub it in, and then it used to look so black. There was no
So
variance, like you said.
no,
Like there's no blending. You
right.
one day are gray, and the next day you show up to work, you just have like jet black hair. There's no subtlety.
Once in a while, somebody will come. I'll get it done, especially if I wait. Like during the lockdown, sometimes it would take me longer to get it colored, but I would have to. And so when I would get colored, once in a while somebody will there's like this one guy who's obsessed with my hair for some reason. It's like the only reason he watches my show is just so he can comment on my hair.
He's watching right now, and I bet you he's typing a comment
Probably.
about your hair.
Yeah. And he's always like, "Why do you do that?" When it's just, I'm like, a lot of people color their hair. It's not. I mean, if you want to make yourself change your appearance and look better, you want to do things to yourself. I mean, I lift weights so that I look and feel better. I shave because I like doing that. I clean myself. All of these things are just things that we do to just kind of make ourselves feel better. I'm not really doing it for anybody else. And it does make I feel better just knowing that it's not gray. And I had gray hair for a long time. Even on my earlier videos, my hair was all gray. But
You had gray in your goatee, didn't you? I mean,
I
that's where it
did.
came
Yep.
for me first. I had this
Well,
little
and
patch
that
grow
was
here.
in about a month ago. I thought, let's try growing a beard again and see how that goes. And then I shaved it off. It's just not. I don't like it. It just makes me feel old because it's just all gray. And then as soon as I think that thing people can do to make themselves look younger is first thing is shave the beard. I think
Yes.
beards always make people look older, and that can work in your favor if you're young and you want to look older. I used to every high school. Did you have a kid in your high school who could like have a full
Yeah.
beard?
So
Everybody knew that kid.
I grew the one where you could grow kind of like long lamb chop sideburns, and then like a little kind of pencil mustache, and then a little bit of here, and nothing connected. It was all separate kind of continents on my face. And then it took me years. I went through all of high school trying to rock a beard and just, those little pathetic mustaches. But there was one kid in our school. His name was Gareth. And man, grade 9, he showed up. It was his first day. It was his first day, and he hopped on the bus, and he had a full-blown beard in grade 9.
Don't you hate that?
Man, look at that! And people would go up and just touch it.
And then there was also every high school had like the one guy who was like going bald too. We had a guy who was like almost completely bald.
Yeah.
I felt so sorry for the guy.
And you feel for those people because you have this full head of hair, or at the time in high school, I had a long hair. I used to rock a ponytail and whatnot. So it's kind of hard to be like, hey, I feel you, man. It must suck to be receding. It's like,
well, now I think everybody would just shave it completely. It would just be a common thing to do. I think
love rocking the bald look now. I mean, it's so normal. I mean, people without receding hairlines like the bald look. Have you ever been bald?
No. I've shaved. I haven't shaved. I've cut my hair super short
But like
maybe
buzz cut, maybe.
kind of a buzz cut. Yeah, maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe longer than that in some of my videos. And I didn't like that look either. And this is the longest my hair's been. I can't believe we're just talking about hair on this
It's been
podcast.
10 minutes of talking about our hair.
Oh, I know what I wanted to mention to you is, documentaries are like documentaries are huge right now.
Yes.
I don't know why, but I think we all just kind of get drawn into that. But have you seen This Is Paris, or have you heard about This Is
No,
Paris?
no, but I heard about it and I was interested because she is kind of one of those character, Paris Hilton, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Paris Hilton. And I'd never known much about Paris Hilton other than kind of tangentially what's going on with her. And you always hear people that would say, "We don't. She's just famous for being famous, and what does she
Yeah.
actually do?" And all. And this documentary just kind of shows the real who she really is, and it's way different than you actually think she is. And she is really, and she even kind of owns up to the fact that she was kind of the original social media
She is.
influencer. She was taking like selfies, in 2002 or
Yeah.
something, and with a camera, right? No
Yeah.
phone or anything. And she talks about like everything she talks about she was doing is what young people especially are doing today, except in much greater numbers. And she's like, I was I was kind of impressed by her, really. And I never knew this side, that this is all everything you thought you knew about Paris Hilton is really, it's just a character that she plays, like this ditzy character who's just totally out of touch with regular people and everything. But even just to hear her speak in this documentary and like use her regular voice that
Yeah.
I didn't realize she had. You always hear like this mousy little childlike voice that she does, and she's just constantly referring to her brand, and that everything she does is basically on brand for her. And as a result of that, it's very difficult for her to form relationships. She can't
Mhm.
like really trust anybody, and she doesn't have any time to herself. She has no privacy. And I just thought it was enlightening to see that, and to see that this kind of abuse that she went through as a teenager is her parents sent her to this like it's one of these like tough love places, where they send you
Yeah.
to this camp. But it was more than that. I mean, they were like physically abusing these kids. And she escaped from a number of those, and now she's involved in this group of like basically survivors of this, and trying to tell the story of how all of that affected her life. But it was just, I don't know, it was just one of those documentaries that comes along that you're like, oh yeah, it's a kind of a buzz going around about it. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I'll watch it. And I was just totally drawn into it. And then by the end of it, I had a totally different idea of who Paris Hilton was. And it's not what I was thinking. And it just kind of shows how a lot of our opinions on people in the media are formed by just this mass
You
thing.
think you know.
You
think you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
She went through and did all of this at a time that she became like the whipping post for everyone who hated
Yep.
that, because it was so new. And it's funny because there's several examples of this. I've been thinking about this a while. Like, I get it that we live in 2020 now and everything's upside down, but even over the past 10 years, so much has changed in the way that the acceptance of all of this stuff that we were just talking about. She was doing it at a time that she was the only one. She was a billionaire,
Not quite.
from an incredibly rich family. So
one of her goals is she wants to be a billionaire.
Yes. And she's from the Hilton family. So she started her entire career as Rich Brat. And then she did, she was one of the first to do a true reality show with, what's her name? The other girl that she used to hang around with all the time.
You mean The Simple Life?
Simple Life.
Right. Yeah.
That was very, very early on in the whole push for kind of reality stars and whatnot. And as you said, she was kind of the first person to be that Kim Kardashian, famous for being famous, or famous for just clearly you're a rich, you're from a rich family and you live it up. And she, I don't know if it was her or if it was someone who was interviewing her who literally called her pretty much not the inventor of the selfie. Obviously, everybody's taking pictures of themselves, but she popularized it in a way where like that's what we look at as a selfie these days, was what she was doing back in those days. And as much like, and especially because it was a reality show that she was on, and she was using her name, and it clearly was a character of her. It was difficult because people had no basis for understanding that. Like most people kind of have a character when you have a YouTube channel or even in your own name, like it's a version of you, but it is still a character that you're putting up, and you're being kind of whatever. And I can see how people would look at that and just hate her and hate everything about her. I was thinking of Miley Cyrus earlier, where
Yeah.
she was swinging from the wrecking ball, and she went through her kind of like slutty stage, if you will, and being very provocative and showing nudity and whatnot. And at the time, she was the punchline of every single person's joke, and so many people spoofed and whatnot. But man, it's amazing what 10 years will do when you look back. I remember going through and watching it and being like, this is brilliant. It's wonderful how she's just completely changed her thing. And now she's like pushing buttons and she's getting huge success out of it. But everybody just kind of leaned into her. And then 10 years later, then is when they go back and be like, remember how groundbreaking it was when she did the swinging from the wrecking ball, and she managed to launch an entire career after being a child star and being the son of a country and western. And she kept forging and breaking through and changing and still having people talk about her and whatnot. And it's funny how when you go through that, I think of John Cena going through an entire 10-year or 15-year career of being a peak wrestler and being the person who like personifies, it doesn't matter if you cheer me, it doesn't matter if you boo me, just come and make a reaction, and building that. And we all thought we knew who John Cena was when he was a wrestler and da. But now, again, 10 or 15 years later, you look back at John Cena, it's like, oh, one of the most important wrestlers of the time. No one said that back in the day.
Yeah.
It's always this 2020 hindsight of people who do like really, interesting different things like that. And I think Paris Hilton's a great example, because she was literally just rich brat. Who cares about her? And I have seen several interviews with her, so I do kind of know a little bit about like her as a person. It's like, no, she's incredibly charitable. And yeah, she seems to be using her platform for a lot of good too.
Yeah, and I think what happens in a lot of these cases, and Miley Cyrus is a good example. Justin Bieber is another good example
Yeah, he's a great
they
example.
become. We tend to love to have this kind of group think where it's okay to kind of like hate on somebody. Like this is the one person who's like, yeah, that sucks. Nobody would admit to liking Miley Cyrus or Justin
Yeah.
Bieber. But if you're objective, and if you listen to like Justin Bieber, like he's very talented, and Miley Cyrus is too, and they didn't get that place from not being talented. And what they do is they're really good at what they do. And I don't think a lot of people would be, I don't know if it's strong enough or to admit it or whatever, but they just won't come out and admit that, well, okay, I may not like some of this persona that they're doing, but
But
what they're doing, they're pretty talented. And with Paris Hilton, she's got like 17 companies that are brands that she runs. And I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar operation. She's traveling like 250 days a year. She's a DJ. I didn't know she was a DJ, and she
she's a
performs in
DJ.
these huge,
Mhm.
huge venues. And she can command like $1 million per gig just DJing. I mean, it's amazing. And she said she's never worn the same clothes twice she's never been photographed twice in the same set of clothes. Always she changes clothes like 3 times a day, because she probably doesn't even buy her own clothes, because these designers are always
Just send them to,
sending
yeah.
her things. But I was just surprised at how kind of how much she's got it together as a business person, really. And
Mhm.
she kind of really knows what's going on. But at the same time, I really felt sorry for her, because in some ways she reminds me of Michael Jackson, and how she's like at that level. I mean, Paris Hilton is a person that everybody knows. That's like that kind of celebrity. You don't even have to know much about her, but to know who she is. But she can't just go out and do normal things, and she has
Thanks.
real trouble struggling just trying to find relationships and boyfriends. And they were asking her, well, do you think you're ever going to have kids? And you could tell she was like, I would like to, but no, I don't think, I'm kind of reading between the
Yeah.
lines. Was like, no, it's
Yeah.
just something that can't really happen with
Yeah.
her. And she's always talking about her brand and how everything she does is based on her brand. And she'll start to slip in and out of that kind of squeaky voice that she would use. And you could tell when it's like a nervous situation, maybe she's in, she kind of goes into that character, and
Mhm.
then to just hear her talking normally. But she mentioned that when she was young, how she grew up being photographed. I mean, from her early on, her father was always shooting video, and they were always doing this. And I think, wow, this is real similar to what we see on YouTube now with a lot of these family vloggers. These kids are growing up in front of a camera shooting video of them every single day of their lives.
Yeah. I was at Walmart the other day and I saw a toy from Ryan's World, I think it's called, or it used to be Ryan Toy Review or Ryan's Toy Review. Anyways,
Yeah.
10 million subscribers. We probably know. I remember through ClamourCon, actually, I don't remember who it was that I was talking to, but um, his toy line at the kind of the peak of his career, I guess it was a few years ago. Funny talking about a 10-year-old who had the peak of their career a few years ago.
That's sad.
But like that was, kind of clearly when he was in a sweet spot. I remember like his videos always used to trend and all of the rest. And he apparently was the second or the third biggest toy toy sales business, full stop, like at Walmart. So it was like Mattel, Hasbro, and then whatever the Ryan's Toy Review line was. And it was mind-blowing to be like, oh my gosh, you went from just kind of having this. Anyways, I was at Walmart and I saw, it's called Ryan's World now, and there's a picture of him on there, but now Ryan's older. Ryan's kind of out of that, he kind of is starting to look like, yeah, you're a little too old to be on the packages of the toys. And that must be a tough position to be in, where you're changing or like you're growing and all of the rest, and your success is based upon you being at a very, very particular age. And I thought about it because he's a kid, like he understands what this is like now, and he's going to go through the next few years of his life with that change, and people just naturally wanting to move on from him, and his audience growing older and maybe not wanting to still kind of stick around with him and whatnot. And it just got me thinking, and I guess that's kind of what we've been talking about in a roundabout way, is how you kind of either reinvent yourself or try to figure out how to know when to end something. Paris Hilton's a great example of like kind of getting away from that, stepping clearly into more of an entrepreneur role or a business role, or I know that she does a lot of philanthropy stuff and whatnot. But there comes that time where it's time to grow and kind of like move on and do something else. And that trips a lot of people up, because you see a lot of people still doing the same thing that kind of made them famous. And then you see a person like Miley Cyrus, where it's like, grow, try something new, try something different, challenge myself to whatever. And it's funny because we as a society take it out on these people because they're being the martyrs. But after a while, you're standing, aren't you? You're standing. You're done sitting.
I was hoping for you not
Done.
to I can't sit for very long. I get too fidgety.
This wasn't being recorded, so we were actually having a conversation about sitting and standing desks. I have a sitting and standing desk, which I keep in the sitting position 95% of the time. And I found out, and I didn't know this, that Steve stands 100% of the
I
time.
stand all the time. I've got when I built the new desk a few years ago, and I got one of those sit stand desks, and it raises up, sets down, and I thought, well, it'll be interesting once in a while. I'll try to stand, and now it's just up all the time. I never ever sit down at my desk anymore. In fact, when once in a while my son will put it down when he's using my computer for whatever, he needs to use some Photoshop or something, and then I'll come to it and it'll be there, and I'll try sitting, and it feels really awkward to me. I just can't do it anymore. I enjoy sitting or I enjoy standing. And I think the more we learn about how much damage sitting does to our spines and our bodies, it's just good to just, relieve that. Even if you do sit and have to sit at a desk, you should really be getting up every 30 minutes and doing even if it's just like a 60 seconds of stretching for your back and try to realign your spine is really important. Otherwise we're all hunched over looking at phones these days, and it's hard for, you'll see more and more bad posture arising. I've been trying to fix my posture over the past, couple of years, and just trying to keep myself tall.
I've been trying to fix my posture since I was born, because as a tall person, and I
Yeah.
know this from other tall people, you feel very tall in the world, so you naturally kind of, when having conversations, when being around people, you naturally kind of
Yeah.
bring yourself down to eye level with them. So I always sit or stand with a kind of a bit of a hunch, or like sometimes I'll see a picture of me standing. It's like I'm hunched over or whatnot, and it's tough because you don't think about it. And then I bought one of those things off of Amazon. It's like a back brace,
Mm.
and you put one arm in and you put the other arm in, and it's super tight, so it keeps your arm, your shoulders back. And I wore it for like 3 days straight, and I was like, this is great. And then I took it off. I had like red marks all over me, and and it really, really hurt. And it just didn't feel natural. So I moved on from that. But I have found out that there are people, specialized doctors, obviously, who, I mean, chiropractors, I'm sure also do it, but there's specialized doctors who kind of help you with your
Right.
posture. Perhaps something for me to do, because it's really tough, and it's real. And that's why I like sitting down, because I end up feeling
Yeah.
much more kind of like in the world when I'm sitting, as opposed to standing and kind of looking over everything, or at least
I,
that's how
I
it feels to me.
remember I remember my grandfather when I was a kid, or I was like a teen, and he would like pow, and he'd like tap my back, and he'd say, pull your shoulders back, and I never really understood exactly what he meant, but and recently I've kind of understand really what having a better posture means. And it's not just pulling your shoulders back, it's sort of pulling them back and then down at the same time, and thinking of your head as being on like a string, like a marionette or something that's pulling your spine up, and that your core, your stomach is always pulled in, toward your back. You're trying to pull your belly button in. So I'm always kind of consciously aware, and standing really helps that, to keep that tight, those tight abs. As much as I don't have those six packs, but I try to keep that tight. Now, God, that's like the worst thing for me, is that I lost 30 pounds, and I was like, I'm pretty happy with everything except those love handles. And for guys, that's the last thing
It's the
that you,
toughest one.
it's the toughest one, because everything, that's just where those fat reserves just store. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to get rid of it. And you can't spot reduce, you just have to.
I recently I got a Peloton, and I really like it.
Mhm.
And they do, just outside of the bike stuff, they do a whole bunch of other just full on workout stuff if you want to do it. So I was doing some stuff, and they were talking about exactly that, how a good posture, especially when working out, can like change your breathing.
Mhm.
It's actually also psychologically, you end up being more assertive and
Definitely.
confident in one way. It is such a, I mean, I guess that's why they're like, pull it back and put your chin up and walk with a whatever. Like, there apparently is some actual science behind all of that. It's
Definitely.
high time that I actually do that, because I do want a six pack at some point. I think I could do
I
it.
do too.
I want to like bucket list it, even if it's just for one day. I'll work as hard as it is to have it for one day, take a bunch of pictures for Instagram, and then just go back to cheeseburgers. But I'm hoping to like get to the point. And sorry, ultimately we were talking about spot training. So I was going through, and it's like same thing with me: love handles and a little bit of a gut, but everything else, like, people look at me and they're like, well, you're skinny. And I guess I am. I consider myself skinny fat. Like, I'm skinny enough to be able to like suck everything in and walk with a
Mhm.
certain posture, to be like, that guy's skinny. But like, when you see me sitting on a couch and not like paying attention to anything, it's like, that guy is not skinny. So so I was like, okay, well, I'm not worried about anything else, because I don't need to lose any weight anywhere else. So I'm just going to target. I went on YouTube and I went on the internet, and
Yeah.
it's so crazy how there's a lot of people who just will not tell you that. And they'll be like, oh, want to burn off your things? Do this
Yeah.
exercise and do this. And then I came across one video on YouTube. I don't remember the dude's name. He had a fairly substantial following, and he looked like a very kind of fit guy. And he's like, let me just tell you something. He's like, it is impossible just to like do an exercise which just targets fat in a particular area.
Right.
And I remember feeling really silly after learning that, because I was like, yeah, I guess that really makes sense. It's not like I'm doing push-ups and it's like, yeah, go ahead, six pack. This is how I do it. Even though push-ups don't do something like that, but sit-ups don't. Like, as much as you're working your abdominal muscles, you're not going to be able to see them no matter how muscular they are if they're still surrounded by fat.
Right.
So
That's true.
that's the rub.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because, and I put it on the thing.
Oh yeah, we've got a thing. I really
think
we've started a thing. We've got like a couple of Google Docs going that we're sharing of, we like brainstorm things like, here's things that might be worth talking about. But I think what's cool about this is that we don't discuss these things we want to talk about until we're actually talking about them. So that everything that we talk about is kind of like fresh,
organic.
Yeah, we're not like, hey, we're going to talk about YouTube channel growth. Let's spend an hour talking about it, and then we'll make the podcast talking about it. We actually tried that when we did our first attempt, our first go around at the podcast last year, and we would have like almost, I wouldn't say it was a rehearsal, but we would talk about what we wanted to talk about, and we had these great discussions. And then when we get to the actual recording of the podcast, it just felt really weird.
We had nothing.
Wait, we'd already just talked about this. It felt like I'm just repeating myself.
Melissa watched one of the episodes of the podcast for the first time, and she was impressed. She was like, Steve did a great job. You did okay, Chad. The only problem is you drink far too much Coke Zero and you're like hiccuping and burping throughout the thing. So I'm going to do my best after this can to not have any fizzy drinks during a podcast. I didn't even think about that. So I apologize to everybody who's like, man, would he stop drinking fizzy drinks and hiccuping, burping? The thing that I wanted to ask you about was actually equipment related. And the reason why it's equipment related is because I just picked up a brand new camera. And this is the first time we have upgraded our equipment here at Clean My Space in a very, very long time. And it took a very substantial camera to get us there. But I have never, I don't think, ever asked you, what camera do you use to record your videos?
I have the Canon T3i, 4i.
Is that a T3i? That must be.
Keep talking, Chad.
I will keep talking. That's got to be a few years old. My favorite camera.
Oh no, I'm right way off. This is the T7i.
Wow, you have upgraded quite a few times since then.
No, only once.
Was T3? That was the first one.
No, this is my second one. I think I skipped. I think the T3 or something, and then I upgraded. There was
a T5, I think, and now there's a T7. When did you get that one?
Oh, I've had this probably for maybe 4 or 5 years now, probably. I'll bet.
And you have the big Rode mic on top. That's a very Casey Neistat looking.
Yeah, I love having this because I don't want to wear around a lav mic. I just don't want to even do that. And I like the sound of this because it captures the echoey sound in my shop. It captures the birds, traffic going by. All of that stuff kind of adds to the feel of my videos. And I like that I don't have that TV quality sound on them.
Yes.
And it sounds good when you're within 6 feet of this microphone. It really picks up voice as well, and it captures the deep in. I have 2 lenses on this camera. This is the one no, I don't remember which one it came with, but I've got the zoom, which is 80 to 200, which I use for real close-up shots that I need to do with my hands, fiddling with something. But this one is my 10 to 18 millimeter. And
what a great lens.
This is the one I use for almost probably 80% of the time. I use this one because and I use it at that 10 millimeter wide angle. And that way I can set it up. I can reach it while looking at myself in it because the camera has this forward facing monitor, so I can see how it's all set up. And this camera, these DSLRs like this have so many features to them and I never use any of them really. I use the most basic. I use the auto white balance. I use autofocus to focus on myself, and then I lock it in so it doesn't do that focus trying to find me if you're moving around,
Yep.
focus back and forth thing.
Which is so annoying to watch.
It
Attention,
is.
every YouTuber who does the the
Autofocus.
follow around, and then it'll catch an orange in the background and they'll just focus on that and you're out of
Right. Oh, I think it's a good camera to have, and that and then the auto exposure too. I find that there's an exposure meter at the bottom of the frame, and I'll kind of go by that, but really just looking at that little monitor and seeing what it looks like is perfect. It works great. And because sometimes that meter will be off depending on how dark a scene is in a certain spot that I don't want it to be dark, or
Yep.
or the opposite. And so I just do it visually, what looks bright, and that's almost always works great. But again, I'm also in the type of I've also kind of set my channel up with that sort of expectation, I
Yeah,
guess. It's not the best quality. It's all I need to do is just really get information out there, and people like that more than any fancy camera. I joked one time that I was going to get a drone. Everybody, for a long time, everybody had to have a drone shot for everything. And I thought it would be funny to just have a drone inside of my workshop, just hovering like 5 feet above me.
So I got one.
Got the drone.
And Melissa just looked at me and she's like, "What? Like a toilet? Like you're just big dramatic zoom out of a toilet? What are you going to do with your drone?"
Well, you know what it is? Like every drone shot I see now is like, oh boy, more rooftops of houses.
Hey, look,
there's your suburban neighborhood. Yay.
Yeah, with some lo-fi beats over it. Yeah, oh, that's good. Yeah, never seen lo-fi beats and aerial footage of New York City.
Lo-fi hip-hop beats to study/relax by.
Okay, so I'm guilty, by the way. I want to start a channel of my own. But instead of it being animated, it's literally just a shot of me at the desk actually working for 3 hours.
Yeah, really.
And then just play whatever music I wanted to play. Yeah. We had our first, when we got married, a wedding gift from Melissa's sister was the T3i. And we were using just like a regular point and shoot up to that point. And I mean, this was very, very early on. And then we got the T3i, and that was the whole like, oh, now we can actually kind of properly do this. And it was, I think I just used whatever the stock lens was at the time, whatever came with it. But it had the little flip out screen and 1080p, and it was super clear. And I remember just feeling like we are on top of the world. We ran with the T3i for a good long time until we moved to a 5D, which is like a full frame version. So like the T's are kind of crop sensors, so they're a little smaller, and this is like a full frame camera. So
what does that mean? I don't really understand what a full frame means.
So it's literally the size of the sensor and the amount of information that it can take up. This frame right here would be, classified as a crop frame. If I were to set up a camera and it were to be the T3i, and I were to, set it so that this was the frame. If we were to use a full frame camera with the exact same lens set up in the exact same place, you're going to probably get an extra 30% of the frame outside of this in the exact same way. More information, the file sizes are larger, allows you to kind of punch in a little bit better because the quality is a little bit. It's very minute. The only reason why I ended up going with a 5D was because at the time, the show House with Hugh Laurie, they, for like an actual, television show, a proper television show, whenever they just needed small cameras to sit inside of a car or just capture a second angle, I found out that they use these because the quality is so good that they can put it up against their Red cameras or whatever the fancy cameras that they use for the actual show, and no one would really be able to tell the difference. So I was fascinated by that. And we used the 5D for many, many years. And then we moved up to the 5D Mark III, which was fantastic. But the issue with them is they don't have pop-out lenses. They're big, old, clunky. They have very expensive lenses. And
Mhm.
They
To
themselves are very expensive.
to me, that pop-up monitor that's a deal breaker. If I can't see myself, I can't, because I shoot everything on my own. I don't have anybody else shooting it, you know?
And that's it. We have a monitor. So we have a monitor that you can plop on top and flip around and be able to see. But monitors, especially back in the day, used to be like 720p if you were lucky. And that'd be like $800 for a monitor versus just having a little flip screen.
Right.
But indeed, that was the reason why we went with this. This is, I think, one of the first full frame I could be completely wrong here. One of the first full frame cameras with this cool little flip out lens. It has touchscreen, which is really nice. And it also has like the Wi-Fi, so I can just take the files off of the camera if I wanted to. And it has an incredible sensor and all of that other good stuff, but it's 4K, and it's 4K 60 frames per second. So the next time someone watches Melissa cleaning a toilet, it's no longer is it 1080p 30 frames per second. No, 4K 60 frames per second. And actually there's a 120 frame per second option available, so you can get like that really crisp super slow motion.
Have you
So
ever shot any of your videos in 24 frames and just try to get that cinematic look for any reason whatsoever?
that's what, the person who shoots with us and has shot with us for many, many years, Luke, who's the executive producer here at Clean My Space, he is a sucker, a traditionalist for 24 frames per second. So pretty much all of the videos that we've shot over the past however many years have been 24
Oh,
frames per second.
really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just a personal thing with him. I've always wanted to get up to 60 frames because I just love the crisp, clear. I remember seeing something in 60 frames per second for the first time, and I'm just like, that's incredible. Look how crisp and detailed and everything is. And
Well, you know, there was a movie that came out last year. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Action movie. I think it might have had Jamie Foxx, or no, I can't remember who was in it. But it was a feature movie that was all shot in 60. I think it was 60 frames per
Mhm.
second, and they got kind of some backlash from that. People were like, it looks too much like a video game. It
Yeah.
doesn't look good, and it doesn't look like what we want to see in a feature movie.
I remember just seeing it for the first time and just something seemed like it was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on why it looked
Hmm.
different, but it did. It looked like, I remember I kept using the analogy of it looks like a home video. It looks like,
Right.
it doesn't look like a TV show anymore. It doesn't have that glow or warmth to it. I don't know
Yeah.
what the word is that I'm looking for. Like, it doesn't have that softness. Everything is incredibly sharp and incredibly clear. And just movement is so fluid. It's like I'm literally looking at the person
Yeah.
kind of doing these things. You get less kind of blur like that and stuff like that. So
Hey,
yeah.
what kind of audio do you use? What kind of microphone?
Uh,
You've got that.
we
Is that
do.
a
We use, so these are Sennheiser mic packs again. So with lighting, I'm a fan of sunlight. I'm a fan
yeah?
of just shooting with whatever light is available. And if something's really, really dark, bring in a light. We just bought some basic light panels and didn't invest a whole lot into lighting. One of the things very, very early on that we decided was getting really good mics.
Mm.
Simply because we just wanted the audio quality to be really good. And Melissa used to, well, she still does a lot of television work. And we realized every time she would go on a show to do television, they would hook her up to one of these Sennheiser
Yeah.
mics, and it was always this exact same mic pack. And I was like, wow. And then fast forward a few years later, we bought like a really cheap lab set. I think it was like a Audio Technica $200 little kind of thing. It just sounded horrible, and you could hear the crackle between the receiver and the transmitter and whatnot. Upgraded to these. They were kind of expensive, but we've been using them ever since, and loved the sound. The only downfall, and I think that's what you were pointing out, was every single time you want to fire up a video, it's not just like set it, forget it,
Yeah.
and let's get into it. It's like, let's put a laugh mic. And sometimes it's hard to be doing a more casual video and someone sees a mic because it just has a formal kind of appearance to it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So we also do have that same Rode mic that you do. So if we're doing like a vlog or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that I rarely have people comment about poor quality sound on my videos, and it's just, I think it's just because people know what they're getting into with this video. They're watching it for different reasons, and they know it's not. And it's the same with the lighting too. And I've I've mentioned this a number of times that I've just been using totally natural lighting over these past 5 or 6 months. I've got just tons of lighting in my shop because it's for me, it was really important to have everything really brightly lit, and not just for the video, but for woodworking itself. And if I'm still working on something really detailed, I'll turn all the lights on, and
Mhm.
or if I'm just not getting enough light. Usually when I have to turn them on is when my garage door is open and the sunlight in the afternoon is shining in too brightly, and it's just too
Right.
much
Yep.
contrast. And so it's
Yep.
just, I have to have something to even out that light a little bit. But I'm totally a fan of just using natural lighting when possible, especially with the modern cameras, DSLRs, you can crank that ISO up and it still looks pretty darn good. I mean, I regularly shoot at 1600 ISO. And when I went to photography school, I got a degree in commercial photography, and that was back when we were shooting on film. And it was like the goal was almost always to try to shoot on 100 ISO film so you would get a sharp
Yeah.
image. And if you went up to even 400 ISO, it was like, well, you're going to be getting a little bit of grain on that. I hope you like that look. And a lot of times it looked great, but those were kind of the benchmarks. And now, and if I'm shooting like in the house, I've got to shoot something. Sometimes I'll just crank it up to whatever the highest is, like 10,000 or something, and it looks fine for YouTube.
The Canon R6, just in case anybody was wondering what camera I was talking about earlier, goes up to 112,000. And I think if you put like Magic Lantern, or you can trick it out to actually get 250,000 ISO. I remember watching a video that someone shot it was in like the mountains. It was in the wilderness. So there was no artificial light. It was just a pitch black, and it was when the Sony A7 first came out a few years ago, and that ISO could go all the way up to like 112,000. He's like, I want to show you what that looks like. He went out into the middle of nowhere. It was a YouTuber named Dave Dugdale, and he went out into the middle of nowhere in Washington or something like that. And he set up a camera on a tripod, and he just sat in a chair, and he's like, this is 100 ISO. And then he kept switching it up. And he got to whatever it was on the camera. I think it was 100,000 or something ridiculous, an incredibly high number. And it looked like it was just like the sun was just going down. It was like a little dusky, and there was no grain. There was no, further to your point. And that's the thing. Like, I think we remember 10 years ago shooting at, I remember doing a shoot with like a proper production company. And they're like, we do not want to see your ISO above 400 at all.
Yeah.
And it needs to be 100. And if we need to bring in more light, we'll literally hire, we'll start a fire in the corner just to get the right light, as opposed to doing it in camera settings. And I guess I get that. You certainly don't want grainy footage and all of the rest. But I, further to your first point, love just natural light. I love the shadows it creates. I like it when you do have natural dark spots, because it just has such a, I don't know, a natural vibe to just using light the way it should be, as opposed to artificial light when you start getting, you start worrying about T-zones and shadows under your eyes. And it's like, that's what I want.
And you think about the intended use. YouTube also, it's
Right.
kind of built on the foundation of amateur, productions, people just doing it themselves, and it kind of lends itself to that. I mean, obviously, if I was going to be shooting what I do for, television production, it would be totally different than
Right.
I do. It wouldn't, and people wouldn't want to see this on television the way I shoot it here, because the expectations are totally different on those two formats. It's a completely different beast. And I see what I've noticed lately, though, in the last couple years, is YouTube videos looking a lot more like TV, really, especially in the how-to videos. They're really coming to resemble a lot of TV, and not just in the visual look, but in the way they're presented, the pacing of them, the music score, the corny dialogue, the back and forth stuff, a lot of that. And I kind of thought for a while YouTube was going to have more of an influence on TV, but it seems to kind of be, TV's really working its way into YouTube more and more.
I think the glamour of it all is the thing that is hard. Like, I think as soon as you can have it looking amazing, people just opt to make it look amazing. But that was, I think what your point is, the most appealing thing was back in the day, it was like, this isn't that. This isn't that at all. This is just someone sitting and setting up a camera and having a thing and trying something different and not worrying about, we talked about Zach Johnson in a previous, like, here's a dude who can afford probably great props and excellent, but like there's something so wonderfully like organic about doing it without like budget. But we now work, and we've also talked about this in a previous podcast, we now have people starting channels on YouTube because it's a business or they want to build a brand, or there's another reason outside of, I started at
Yeah.
least, and I know you started because we wanted to, like, hey,
Yeah.
what a cool thing. Like, let's fool around on this and see what happens. And what eventually became our businesses and livelihood was grown out of a passion for wanting to do,
Yeah.
to do it in the first
I
place. And
hope.
it wasn't to build up Clean My Space into a huge thing and sell cleaning, but like, that's wonderful that it's gotten this way, but that's now the attitude coming out of the gate. And I find that that's probably the biggest obstacle that most new channels face. It's like, but I have great camera and I put up a thing, and I've worked with other people who have been trying to start channels and consulted with them and da da da. And it's very tough to just tell them, it's like, you need your idea to be like amazing, because it's now not hard to have all of your stuff look professional, because everybody's stuff looks professional. Like,
Right.
moms who are cleaning their house are cleaning them with $1,000 DSLR cameras and proper mic setups and amazing, like it's a thing now. So it's not just like, hey, let's upload some videos and kind of see what happens. People now kind of approach this platform as like, cool, let's make sure everything looks
I
amazing and
think
tight.
that
And that's very TV.
I think and I hope that YouTube will retain kind of that dual aspect of what it can be, that it can still be the guy who shoots a really dumb cat video that goes viral, and it can be the more professional productions. I know that like a lot of the streaming platforms now, well, they all, they have their own original programming, the Netflix originals and the Amazon originals. And now, well, like the This Is Paris, the documentary, it's a YouTube original. So it's a
Oh, is
YouTube.
that a YouTube original?
Yeah. So, and that's the
Oh,
first time I'm sure it's happened before, but that's the first time I noticed YouTube original. So it's almost like that is becoming like they're trying to do what the other streaming services are doing and produce
yeah.
their own, full length productions like that. And it's just one of those things that kind of like, well, I guess, but it's also, as long as YouTube can have both, I'm okay with that. As long as you can still find that guy, working out of his shop and doing cool videos. And I think YouTube knows that. I think they know that really their bread and butter for a lot of their existence relies on just those goofy videos that people do, or these silly channels devoted to one specific topic, that somebody's just producing on a whim. And I think it'll still maintain that. But I think the reality of it is that it probably all started with all these late night talk show hosts,
Yeah.
posting
Well,
those
that I mean, a
viral.
lot. Yeah, but that was a lot of finger pointing, and there was a period. I don't even remember how many years ago it was, that they started bringing in traditional celebrities and giving them
Yeah.
YouTube channels. It actually failed miserably the first time they did it. They tried to give Robin Williams. They tried
Uh,
to get on board, and he ended up doing a guest spot on Ray William Johnson's Equals 10 show or whatever it was. He's like, yeah, I got my own da da da, and that was in and around the time they brought on about a dozen celebrities or whoever, to like start up their own channel. And a lot of people believe that that was kind of the beginning of this slide into, and the late night talk show host is a great example, because those dudes were occupying the trending. So it's hard to get boosted or like, to get some traction through YouTube when the stuff that they're promoting is literally just, all the clips from the late shows, or music videos is a huge one, or just this small group of like dude perfects and all of those people who have massive huge productions and teams and da da da. And as much as I think, yes, they do still have a space for smaller YouTubers, that is not that has changed, I think, just with the overall culture of YouTube not still having that like, aw shucks,
Yeah.
like we're just giving it a go. I think those days are, I think it still exists. Clearly, of course it still exists, because there's a bunch of kids that are building amazing ideas and amazing channels which are unique, and that, and I have complete faith in that. I just hate that the stuff that's really popularized on YouTube now, as you said earlier, is just, it looks a lot like TV. It looks like a
Well,
lot like a streaming service.
YouTube is, it's a teenager now, so it's kind of losing its innocence, I suppose. And one of the things I always enjoy doing on kind of older channels is going to their video list and, you know, clicking on oldest video and seeing what their
Yes.
very first video was. I think it's just such a fun thing to do. And if you already come into this with your production all fully
Yeah.
done, then you don't really want to do that. I would never do that for like a late night talk show host or something. There would be no reason to do that. But it's real fun to see some of these, you know, OG YouTubers from 2006 or 2007 and just see where they started and where they are now. Or some of them got really big and then they just stopped, or they moved on to other
Moved
things.
on to other things. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people that, and perhaps this is a great topic for the next podcast. We
Yeah.
could go through and we could actually do, we could watch each of our first videos, or at least whatever, briefly kind of take a spin through and see what each of us, or at
Cringe
least
fest.
Melissa and you did. Yeah, that would be a bit of a cringe fest. And maybe also talk about some YouTubers along the way. I can think of quite a few
Yeah.
who had large followings and have moved on to greener pastures for one reason or another.
But we all want to
Um,
know what happened to Fred.
what happened to Fred Figglehorn?
Fred Figglehorn, right?
Fred
Lucas Luke
Figglehorn.
Lucas, his real name was Lucas
Lucas.
Cruikshank or something.
He actually, a few years ago, did a channel. I think it was just called Lucas, and he
That's right.
like
Yeah.
interviewed his friends, and I think
Yeah.
he kind of like whatever. It got some traction for a bit. I haven't seen anything since.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of YouTube OGs that maybe we could go and do a little research and find out where are they now.
How old are we?
How old are we?
We remember. You know what's weird is that there's kids watching YouTube now that probably weren't around even alive when Fred was doing those videos.
There is a whole, like, I
They would be
mean,
like 12-year-old kids, because he was probably doing those in 2008. I'll bet 2009. I remember he was
yes,
just the first YouTuber to hit 1 million subscribers, and
that was huge. And he got such traction. And I remember watching the content, and even with the most open mind possible, being like, I don't get what, I mean, I get that
oh,
kids, I get why kids like
I
it, but
didn't. Oh man, my son loved it. Him and his
oh,
friends, they,
really?
they loved it. He was like, yeah, like 10, 12 years old at the time or something. And it just is this Fred with this high pitched, sped up voice screaming. And it was just, I didn't get it. They loved it. Wasn't
I,
me. It wasn't for
I
me.
guess it wasn't for us, was it,
No,
Steve? It wasn't for a couple of middle-aged dudes.
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have to wrap this one up. I've got some guys coming over today. In fact, I think I hear voices outside my door right now where they're going to come remodel our bathroom. So this has been an
That's
ongoing thing. We started this process like almost 2 years ago, trying to get this thing done. It's very difficult to get all the designer, the
yep.
contractors, the permitting. It's a long process. So finally it's starting, but now we're going to be living in one bathroom for a while.
How long is it expected to take? Is it a full gut? Are you just like
Yeah,
everything out and everything
fully,
new in?
completely brand spanking new. So yeah,
Have you picked all of your stuff yet?
yeah, I've got the actual cabinets and everything. They're in a storage unit right now, and so it's yeah, I'll be glad when this is all over because it's been taking a long time.
Are you going to build anything for this, or is this
I
all just
might.
store-bought stuff?
No, I mean all of the cabinets and everything we've already bought. And that was actually it's one of those things that is kind of like, well, why aren't you doing it yourself if you're a woodworker? It's like, well, that's not really what I want my channel focus to be on. It's just like cabinet making for a bathroom, makeover. And I just think that that's the kind of thing that professionals do better because they do it all the time and they know exactly
Right.
the pitfalls to face. Whereas me, almost everything I make is the first time I've made it. I don't typically need 2 dining tables or 3 or more, you know. So it's like, well, this is when I
And they're
got.
hard to mail to friends.
Yeah.
Do you need a dining table, Chad?
Yeah. Really. Hey, how are the mop sales going, real quick before I go?
Outstanding. They've so obviously you get kind of that initial boost, and then it kind
Yeah.
of trails off, and then you kind of start really losing traction. But we've been plateauing at a very good spot that we're very happy with.
Good for you.
And we're just about to start getting proactive with some Instagram ads and da 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 da. So I've been studying a lot about Instagram ads and the little short videos and trying to capture people's attention. And I, in a later podcast, will let you know how successful or not successful I am. But no, as far as the mop sales are concerned, it's been a hit. People absolutely love it.
That's
So
great.
we're
So
psyched about that.
happy to hear that.
We'll go
All right.
get your bathroom started.
I will.
I have a person coming as well because my furnace doesn't work. So he's going to fix the furnace before the winter, before we
Good idea.
freeze to death out here in chilly Canada. So I will go do that. You go tend to your bathroom, and we will talk in 1 week.
Okay. I'll see you then.